this video, you will learn how to correct errors with dangling and misplaced modifiers. A dangling modifier occurs in writing when there is a word, phrase, or clause that does not clearly or logically modify another word in the sentence. Because all modifiers need to attach to a word in the sentence, this error is called a dangling modifier because that modifier kind of just hangs out. It doesn't have a word to attach to. It kind of dangles off the sentence without something that it can anchor to. So here's an example. Walking to the park, my cap flew off my head. The main clause is my cap flew off my head. That's the main action. Walking to the park describes kind of when this happened or how it happened. The problem is that the cap can't walk. The writer most likely intended that, he or she was walking to the park and then the cap flew off his or her head, but that's not what they wrote. So that's one of the things that make these errors really challenging for writers because they know in their minds what they intended to say, but your job as a writer is to express it clearly for your audience. So this is a really good skill to practice correcting these dangling and misplaced modifiers because they happen quite a bit in writing. They're pretty easy to fix. That's the good news. The basic rule is that a modifier needs to be as close as possible to the word being modified. So one way to fix a dangling modifier error is to make sure the word that is supposed to be modified comes right after the modifier. So looking at the previous sentence, we might rewrite it like this. Walking to the park, I lost my cap when the wind blew it off. So now it makes sense. I am walking to the park. Another way to fix this type of error is to rewrite the modifier and to add the subject or the noun that's supposed to be modified into that word group. And this is what it might look like. When I was walking to the park, my cap blew off my head. So one isn't necessarily better than the other. It kind of depends on what you want to emphasize, what kind of imagery you're trying to create, what your other surrounding sentences sound like, the rhythm of the new revision. So when you're revising these, try a couple different versions to choose the one that you think sounds the best for the context in which it appears. Here's a cute example from Bendy. Try rewriting the sentence to eliminate the dangling modifier error. Leaving Starbucks, the foamy latte fell and exploded all over the sidewalk. So of course the illustration shows what the sentence actually says. The latte is leaving Starbucks and it's falling. But that's really probably not what the writer intended. So we have to figure out who or what is leaving Starbucks and make sure we rewrite the sentence to reflect that. So one option might sound like this. Leaving Starbucks, I dropped the foamy latte, which fell and exploded all over the sidewalk. Another option might be this. When I was leaving Starbucks, the foamy latte fell and exploded all over the sidewalk. We could also say, when I was leaving Starbucks, I dropped the foamy latte, and it exploded all over the sidewalk. So there's more than one way to rewrite these to fix these errors, but these are your basic choices. Regardless of which method you choose, you want to make sure that the modifier you choose is placed as closely as possible to the word being modified so that there's no confusion for the reader. Misplaced modifiers are very similar to dangling modifiers. The reason they have a slightly different name is because there's one small difference. With misplaced modifiers, the word that is supposed to be modified, or that the writer intends to be modified, does actually appear in the sentence. So it's not hanging off there, it's just in the wrong place. So we have to move it. Here's a famous example from a Groucho Marx routine. One morning I shot an elephant on my pajamas. How he got into my pajamas, I'll never know, but I'm bummed. So what's the misplaced modifier? What's the problem here? Well, we should figure it out that the problem is the pajamas. The elephant isn't wearing the pajamas. Who is wearing the pajamas? I am. So we need to restructure it so that we have something like this. One morning while wearing my pajamas, I shot an elephant. Or one morning in my pajamas, I shot an elephant. That would work too. But you need to move that phrase in my pajamas closer to I rather than elephant, because it does sound like the elephant is wearing the pajamas in this example. Here's another scribendi example. Try rewriting the sentence to correct the error. The kind mother handed out sandwiches to all the kids in Ziploc bags. Okay, a little silly. The illustration, of course, shows the children in Ziploc bags. We know that's not what the writer intended, but the writer needs to say it the way they intend. So what's the problem? You should be able to pick up pretty quickly because the illustration helps. In Ziploc bags isn't where it should be. It needs to be placed closer to sandwiches. So a revision might sound like this. The kind mother handed out sandwiches in Ziploc bags to all the kids. Both dangling modifiers and misplaced modifiers can appear as single words, phrases, or clauses. So know that there's not only one type of error that you could have with these things. Be on the lookout for all of them. Here's an example of a single word error. Exhausted. A long nap was what the children needed. Okay, so the nap isn't exhausted. Who is? The children, obviously. So here's one option. Exhausted, the children needed a long nap. I actually like that version better than the original, not just because it fixes the modifier error, but because it's also clear and more concise. Correction 2 is also clear and concise. The exhausted children needed a long nap. The difference between correction 1 and 2 is really about rhythm. So either one works very well. You just have to figure out which rhythm is preferable for the context in which it appears. Here's a phrase error. Flying through the air, Sophie saw a giant eagle. Well, it's possible Sophie is flying through the air if she's in a plane or maybe a hot air balloon. Most likely the writer intends that the eagle is flying through the air. So we need to move that phrase to be close to eagle. Clause error. Because she has allergies, our veterinarian gives our dog Lola a shot once a month. Okay, so in this one we might say, well, we don't know if a veterinarian is female, so maybe it can only refer to Lola. Maybe. But we don't want to leave it up to maybe. We want to be very clear. It's not the veterinarian who has allergies, it's the dog. So we need to move that phrase closer to the word dog and or Lola. So option 1, because she has allergies, our dog Lola receives shots once a month. Or our veterinarian gives our dog Lola shots once a month because she has allergies. So now that clause is closer to the word that it's supposed to modify. All right, now it's your turn to do a little practice. Here are 4 sentences that all have misplaced or dangling modifier errors. Rewrite the sentence to correct it. Keep in mind there is more than one possible way to restructure these sentences. Your main goals are, of course, number 1, to fix the modifier error, and number 2, to create clear, concise sentences. So take a moment to pause the video, record your answers, and then start it up again to see some possible correct ones. Number 1, looking through the telescope, the planets were clearly visible. It's probably obvious that the planets are not the ones looking through the telescope, but we need to know who is. That word has to appear in the sentence. So we might rewrite it like this. Looking through the telescope, I could clearly see the planets. Number 2, racing through the last few chapters, the book was a really great read. Okay, well, who or what is actually doing the racing? It's not the book. It's I or some other subject. I raced through the last few chapters because the book was a really great read. This actually gives rise to, this revision helps illustrate another issue with these modifier errors, is that often the agent of the action, the person performing the action, is left out of the sentence. So in both of these sentences, I chose the pronoun I, but it might not have been I. It could have been any number of other pronouns or even concrete nouns. We don't know when they don't appear in the sentence. So that's another problem with these. Number 3, this is a good plan for improving the athletics program that you have proposed. While they may be proposed an athletics program, And if that is the case, then the sentence would be correct. Probably what they've proposed is the plan rather than the program. So we need to move that clause. This is a good plan that you've proposed for improving the athletics program. You could actually make it even better by saying you've proposed a good plan for improving the athletics program, because that's going to make it clear and more concise. Finally, number 4, I've almost read all of the Magic Treehouse books. This one might not sound that weird. Maybe you do mean I've almost read all of them. That would mean that you've started every single book but not finished any of them. That's probably not what the speaker means here. They probably mean they have read almost all of the Magic Treehouse books. So it's a subtle change, but the meaning matters. So it's really important to pay attention to the order of the words, that you've got the agents of the action in the sentence, that you're placing modifiers as close as possible to the words that they modify. That's your number 1 rule for correcting dangling and misplaced modifiers.